is there option or plan? Oh, good, great. Just
Yeah,
like that, eh?
yeah.
Yeah, and then you guys are going to make it available through your websites or something.
Yes, absolutely. We have some plans coming, to wrap up this event.
Yeah,
So I think we're gonna really close it out once we finish this one.
yeah, sure.
Yeah. I saw your post on Twitter with some books and like you're some reading about and hashtag SPS Gurgaon. Looking forward next. I
Oh
like
yeah.
that.
Ah, thanks. I wish I was there in person. It's
All right.
something I would have liked to have done. Last year, I tried to travel to Ahmedabad in Gujarat. So for the last couple of years, I haven't been able to travel. So I thought this year was the year, but things
Yeah.
change.
Yes. And you're never too late to visit,
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. We see people are really joining in. We have 20 right now. Let's just wait for a few more minutes to
Yeah,
get
sure.
started.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's just get started. We can just probably let people come in next 4 minutes.
Yeah.
So welcome everybody again. And we know we have been packed from morning and this is almost night 10:30. So we still see, some of the energy left and just probably make some more shout to, end this game and next for few more hours, I would say. So let's welcome with no wait Mr. Chirag Patel, who's well known for his work in the community and he's in Microsoft MVP and he has turned lots of contributions to the community and he's very well known as well. So let's hear him out for next hour and see what he has to tell in the next to on the side of admin center. And over to you, Chirag, if you just take the control. And just a quick housekeeping items, please be on mute so that it just make a great experience in hearing the speaker. At the same time, if you have any questions, just feel free to drop in the chats and we can probably look into the last 10th minute of the session. And you can always reach out to probably Chirag for more details or more questions if they have. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lalit. Thanks for the introduction, and also thanks for the welcome and inviting me to speak at the M365 Gurgaon and all the attendees. And really appreciate your time taking out, especially in India. It's like 10:30 or just after 10:30, and also being Saturday. So really appreciate that. And so, welcome to my session on navigating your way to different admin centers in Microsoft 365. And so one of the reasons why I chose this session is purely just because I know there's so many sessions out there for Microsoft Teams, or just for the security, or just for the compliance. And Microsoft 365 admin is such a place where the technical folks will find their ways of just managing their tasks, what's within their job spec, whether that's SharePoint or whether that's Exchange. And in some organizations who are very small to medium-sized organizations, they just don't have the luxury of the resource to have dedicated people who can look after each of these workloads. So this session is really kind of designed for small to medium, but as well as the larger enterprises where the skills may be lacking, or there's just not enough bandwidth to try and understand what there is within Microsoft 365 admin, and just generally finding your way around different admin centers and features and capabilities. So we're going to look at that today, and a lot of it is demos. So I've got about around 20 slides, and they're just mainly screenshots and some reference links to it. So after the session, hopefully you can visit those links and basically build that into your routines. And so, with that, I'll kind of just crack on with a few introductory slides. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Chirag Patel. I live and work in London, UK, and I'm a Microsoft 365 consultant. Generally been around for 15, 20 odd years. Kind of started with SQL Server, worked my way with SharePoint, different versions of it, and then back in 2012, what was then called Business Productivity Online Suite, and kind of just really morphed my way into Office 365 and Microsoft 365, and especially the last 5 years, not just for me, but for a lot of technical folks like ourselves, it's been a really roller coaster, and it still is really fast-paced technology, and that's just the reality we're in. So it's kind of finding just the ways of getting around how we keep up with the different aspects of Microsoft 365 admin. Feel free to connect to my social media links. Generally, I go by Tech Chirag, the Twitter and LinkedIn handles. Techchirag.com is my blog site, mainly all the events that I speak at, and I generally upload my slides, YouTube videos, or from different events. So if you have any questions, if I can help out in any ways, feel free to connect. And I'm also an organizer for Microsoft 365 UK user group, which currently is online. And so I welcome to each and every one of you. If you do want to speak at my event, no matter small or big topic, then you'll be most welcome to come and do that. So you can find all those details and the links on my techchirag.com website for that. So if you're interested. In spare time, if I have any, I obviously speak at a lot of events, and these are kind of a lot of the events I've spoken over the last few years. There's links on them, slides and everything else. So there might be something in there for you that you may find useful. So feel free to take a look at that. And generally, I tend to cover all spectrum of tech. So even though my SharePoint is the kind of the baby background for it, but it's obviously these days is quite few. But still, there's a lot of good, valuable materials in there as well. Okay, so depending on how Microsoft 365 is deployed in your organization or for your customers or through through different education establishments, really doesn't matter because the solution is there. We know it is, as Microsoft says it's the world's most productive platform. It's got everything that we can think of. And so, be it if it's internal collaboration or external or document management, or even just kind of, building business applications on it through the use of Power Platform, or maybe in-house custom development kind of projects. And what I tend to do when I visit as a consultant to a lot of these organizations, I always try to find out, why are you using Microsoft 365? This is the slide that goes in my presentations all the time, just to kind of help the customer understand that what you're up against in terms of what platform you have, versus what are you actually using it for. So this kind of helps to break down some of those expectations in terms of what they know, what they don't know, and also kind of help to steer in terms of the journey of their Microsoft 365. So when we look at the last few months, with COVID-19 and everything else, Microsoft Teams has just rocketed in terms of its growth. And it's not as if, customers are really just after Microsoft 365 per se, but Microsoft Teams is the platform for their needs that solves a lot of their problems. But what some customers don't realize, or they don't have the visibility, or even the resource for it to really understand what lies beneath Microsoft Teams. Because as we know it, it's SharePoint lists and document libraries, Microsoft lists that's just recently been made available. All these technologies, you can break it down into this sort of service segments, and then being able to understand how best to manage your platform. And so Microsoft 365 admin is the place for it. And generally, yes, you have global administrator rights, you got SharePoint administrators, Exchange admin. We're not going to go through those security roles. We broadly assume that if you're a SharePoint person, then you're going to have SharePoint administrator to be able to create, manage your SharePoint sites. But we'll go through some of those settings as well. And likewise for Teams, as well as security and compliance. So we'll be pocketing those functionalities in there. And so we'll just kind of navigate starting from the main Microsoft 365 admin all the way into the SharePoint, compliance, security centers, and some of the features that's around that. So when you look at the actual dashboard itself, which we will do that in a few seconds, then essentially it doesn't matter what role you have, depending based on your permissions, you will only see based on that experience. So you have your dashboard that's got basically something that's called a card. Each card carries that piece of functionality, whether that's a billing, whether that's a security or setup, snapshots, it doesn't really matter. Those cards are constantly being developed and deployed by Microsoft. So it's not something that sort of changes on a weekly basis, but certainly I think in the last 12 months, I've seen quite a few cards come across. So we'll go through some of those screens. And then the main thing there is that as a administrator, depending on who you are for Exchange, SharePoint, or what have you, you can actually drag and drop those cards and customize that experience, that page for you. And really, truly, to be speaking, when you look at the Microsoft 365 admin, that is the main kind of way of creating your workspace for how to best manage your admin center. Now, that's obviously on the desktop experience. The mobile app is even better because if you're obviously, as most of us are out and about, walking about, whatever it is, it's a very quick way to actually get access to your admin center. So if you're Android or iOS users, just search for Microsoft 365 admin and log in with your admin credentials, and then you'll have access to your message center and service requests and all those kind of other features there. So hopefully that kind of gives you just the kind of the dashboard experience that you will be looking at for some of them. But that's the way to think about how your dashboard will kind of look around. We're not going to touch every single one of these. These are the collection of the cards that you currently have available within Microsoft 365. So within, when we look at the whole Microsoft 365 space, a big part of it, of course, is Office 365, which is our SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams and everything else. But then you've also got your Windows 10, as well as you got the Enterprise Mobility Suite, which basically together all those things makes up your Microsoft 365. These cards that you see here, it clearly doesn't include Power Platform in there, even though you need a Microsoft 365 tenant for it. But as far as Microsoft 365 admin goes and Power Platform admin goes, they're kind of, if you like, very much separated, even though the identity is integrated, but the actual functionalities, the cards that you have, they're not available yet. So we'll be focusing purely on Microsoft 365 admin centers, security compliance, as I said before. But these are the examples of cards you have. So I keep a list of these, and I track them as well, so that at least I know exactly what cards are where and how to customize those when I'm visiting organizations to help them understand how they can experience their dashboards. So let's take a look at that very quickly before we go into the further aspects of that. So I'm just going to move my screen across. There we go. So when I come to my Microsoft 365 Admin Center, and there's a few things I can do here. Obviously, I've got my menu settings here, but obviously I can customize my navigation. Now, this is obviously the main Microsoft 365 Admin. You can see that on the right-hand side, I can check or uncheck the bits that's relevant to me and have that displayed. But obviously, I've got the final check option there as well if I want to have all admin centers in just one place. Now, as a global administrator, obviously that might be a bit of a clutter to your experience. So you might want to minimize or maximize depending on how you do it. So navigation is obviously the first area to try and make sure that your workspace is kind of neat. The second part is the main workspace screen that you see here. So typically, obviously, you not only you get the recommendation if there is sensitive data, for example, in your environment, that will flash up as it's scanning through your environment, through the machine learning and all the other technologies underlying them. So in this case, you got a card that says recommended based on GDPR info detected. Now it knows, obviously, not just from a tenant perspective, but in this case, it's got the UK bank account card number. So it's kind of giving me a recommendation, and it tells me how many items are applicable to that. I can hover on it and gives me that numbers there. If I scroll down, I've got here an option that says add cards, 7 more available. If I click on it, I get a few options to say I can include my setup card in there, service health, Office 365 active users report, and I can just simply click on and add it. And that's kind of very basic at the basic level, how you can drag and drop some of these cards that's applicable to you. So once I've kind of done that, then obviously I've got my few cards that's displaying here. So again, setup protection from advanced threats. Now I may not have the knowledge or skills in that particular area, and certainly if I don't have access to those admin centers and everything else within that specifically, then a lot of that's not going to make much sense to me. But as a global admin, you will see all those things in there anyways. So essentially it's a one page that has all the cards. In my opinion, I think there should be some few pages, because especially when you got so many admin centers building up now, you end up just spending time clicking around, scrolling up and down and so forth. So I would really like to have a page for each of my dashboards there. But at the moment, we don't have that. It's just the one page you get, and then you kind of work with that. Couple of new bits that's come to the admin center in the last few months, in particular from the billing side of things, as well as being able to purchase your subscriptions and all those things, is your products. Now, before, this used to be quite, in my view, was a bit chaotic, because when you have to look up for a user, what licenses they have, or you want to allocate licenses, or even just to find out how many licenses you've got left, it used to take few trips to get to that information. So here, for your entire Microsoft 365, all your product subscriptions, everything else is here. So yes, you can access that from Azure Active Directory, if you're an Azure administrator. But here, this gives me a nice view as to how many licenses are assigned, the purchase quantity of it, and also the status of it in terms of when it expires. So very easy ways of doing that. But also I can choose particular additional fields in there. So that's a lot of some that is quite new, and being able to have this your products page as a one experience to get all the information about your subscriptions in there. What you can also then do from within this same one page is basically literally just go in there. Okay, that's not what you were expecting. If I go in that one. Right, okay, that's probably my demo tenant, so excuse that one. What I was going to say here is that if I just go into there, okay, that one seems to work, but obviously when you do go into that, then I've got further details in there if I wanted to delete that subscription and giving me more details within that. So it's all within that one page, and then using the navigation trail there, I can go back to my products. So that's kind of the key part that came about in the last 2 months. But within that, also what I've got is the other parts of things as well. So if I go into, sorry, just bear with me a second. I'll go to my slides quickly. Yeah, the active groups as well. So one of the things that you've got in here is the Office 3, not just Office 365 groups, but also just any other groups information. So that's quite, I think it's about 3 months old, that one there. So whereas at the moment I still see some IT pros who run PowerShell scripts to export some of the information about teams that they have, what groups they have. So excuse me, within here, it doesn't want to move from products. Okay, there we are. Okay, that's strange. I can go into deleted groups, clicking on active groups. It doesn't like that. That's weird. I'm gonna just, whoa. Sorry about that. That shouldn't happen. Let's try that again. Oh, let's try this again. Office.com. Wow, that's interesting. All right, that's never happened to me. That's, if I go to a SharePoint site, I can get to that. Okay, for some reason I can't get to the admin app. Wow. I can get to the SharePoint admin. Okay, I'm going to probably try a few seconds time in terms of what's happened there. In fact, what I might just quickly do, I'll just sign out quickly and then sign in again. Okay, so okay, I'm going to leave that for now. Excuse me, come back again. I'm going to just try a different user, Megan, and I know she's also global admin, so I'm going to try that, see if it's just my account there. So if I go back to admin again, okay, so that's fine. Right, let me go to the groups, which is where I wanted to go. Okay, good. All right, could be maybe there's something wrong with my account there, or maybe the browser on that particular window. So what I was going to show you is that in active groups, which has always been here, is the ability to export these groups. So literally by just grabbing all that data from that and being able to open up in a CSV file and work with it. So to be able to monitor my groups and being able to then contact the users who owns this particular groups itself. So like so. So I get, excuse me, so I can get all that info very easily by exporting. And that was one of the most asked feature for being able to export into CSV file. Previously, you only can do that through the PowerShell and through other techniques. So that's a very useful feature to have, and being able to keep an eye on your environment, whether it's Microsoft Teams or Microsoft 365 groups, or even distribution lists from Exchange as well. Okay, so the other areas I wanted to kind of cover from the Microsoft 365 admin was the setup side of things, the setup and the deployment advisors very quickly. So if I go into my setup side of things here, now as I go in here, and this is probably in my experience when I visited, this tends to be one of the most overlooked, if you like, because typically either when you're creating a new tenant, then you will go through this in the first initial stages, and then probably won't come back until further notice or whenever to look back into here. But this is kind of your literally your eyes and ears of your environment. This constantly changes even multiple times during the day. And it kind of sections out into various areas. So you got your sign-in and security areas, and if things are not right in your environment, it will light up as a recommendations. And for anything else that you've completed, it will then light up with those green lights. So in here, I've got something here that apps and updates bring people together in with Teams. So there is obviously Microsoft Teams kind of promotion going on from every tenant, where they can just kind of tell you whether you switched it on or you haven't. So in this case, if I go into a particular area, let's say, so this is done here, set passwords to never expire and so forth. But if I go into, because I'm using Mega's account and I had my other admin account set up, so that had more stuff in that. But if I just come in here for this particular area of feature updates, it tells me at a glance in terms of the kind of information about the subscription, the licenses. If I was to make a change, then what impact the users will have. But also it gives me additional information with the links around what Office updates is all about, how they work, how frequently they're released, and so forth. So I've got all that information within here. But I can click on manage and I can choose my options all within here. So I don't have to go somewhere else for it. And this applies to your other security aspects as well, things like DLPs or that GDPR recommendation that I had in my admin account. So all those things, I can turn those things on within here. So it's kind of a very quick visit to go through all those options and settings, and then kind of have that to your heart's content. So kind of just bear in mind that everything that you see within your setup area, it's very much live, and it's not just the initial stages, it's at the ongoing basis for it. Okay, so if I go back to my admin home page, and in particular, what I'm interested here is the customized setup guidance. So again, depending on where you are in your journey, you may not have switched on all the workloads like SharePoint or Teams or anything like that, but this is kind of a very good area as well. So this is not just for fast track customers or anybody else. This can be open to any small organization out there as well. So here, I've got a setup guidance. So these are basically, this page is all about those wizards to have things configured and switch it on, going through step by step. So as a result, I've got a number of wizards here, and it's defined by guides. So I can have things like remote work setup guides here as well. You can see on the right hand side, a lot of these have not started. And it may be that I don't need to use all of them, but at least I have the options to set that up as and when I need to. So not everything has to be switched on from day one. So if I go and pick an example of something like, say, Microsoft Teams setup guide. So if I click on that, then that will obviously start up the wizard for me. And you can see on the left hand side where I am within this part here. So again, it says, do you want to set up Microsoft Teams? Do I want to configure Cloud Voice? Probably not at this stage, so I'll leave that unchecked. I'll click on next. Do I want to run the network planner test? Probably I've got enough bandwidth for it if I'm in an organization with multiple offices. Again, you can have that turned on, and it uses within your Microsoft Teams as well as a Teams advisor in order to kind of give you the info for that assessment that it'll make. So I can go directly into Microsoft Teams from here if I wished, or I'll just say click on next, and then I'll kind of go through my org-wide settings here. So in this particular instance, I've got one configurable option to say that, do I want to invite external or guest users from outside the organizations? So I'll probably say yes for that. It takes a few hours to take effect, but once I've done that, it then also tells me that there are some additional settings. Now, if I use Microsoft Teams, I roll out, and I know nothing about SharePoint, then this wizard will give me that information to say that, okay, you do need to consider SharePoint, Exchange, email integration, and all these other areas. So I can go to each of these settings directly from here to Microsoft Teams, or I can just go and switch only the basics on that I wanted to here. So I'll go into that, and then the next part is installing Microsoft Teams. So whether that's through the desktop clients or web or mobile apps and everything else, again, I've got various links to help me do that. So as far as when I put my deployment plan together, I can go through this step by step, tasks by tasks within that, and being able to construct my plan for deploying Microsoft Teams. Or I can go through this as a wizard and go ahead and switch it on from that perspective. So if I'm happy with everything that I've got, in this case is about creating Microsoft Teams and channels, and then it gives you a few information about that. I'll go ahead and say next, and then done. It will just go ahead, it'll create a few tasks and everything else behind that. But once it's gone in that, and you can see that it's here, it's in progress. So it will do what it needs to do based on that configurations. And afterwards you go into Microsoft Teams and then have a look how that configuration has been switched on. Of course, if you're a large organization, you may not want to use this wizard altogether, because then you will do in a slightly more comprehensive way. But this is one valuable tool for any organizations who's new to Microsoft 365, who wants to explore and understand more. Then this is worth spending time in this area just to understand what is going on and how the whole environment can be constructed. So that's what I wanted to kind of show you just on that part. If I kind of go back to my slides, so we kind of looked at the quick setup area for that in terms of the recommendation of tasks that you get. We had a look at the deployment advisors or setup guides as they are called, and the various kind of functionalities, feature sets that you have within there that you can actually configure. The next part that I wanted to look at is something that no admins will really get involved by themselves, because either the business doesn't really buy into it, or they don't have inadequate policies or security resource or even a compliance officer, or generally IT is the organization unit that's considered to manage everything about the IT, manage everything about Microsoft 365, its security and its compliance as well. So when you look at that, that is quite a lot, and obviously not only just that, but also the legal team needs to be involved in that before you even have a look at this admin center. But what I tend to find is that sometimes those barriers, because they already exist, and it does exist everywhere, and let's face it, it's not this, it's not the most kind of, if you like, interesting area to work with on a daily basis, but yet it's an area that can have the huge impact to the organization if it's not been configured or if it's not been looked after properly. And so from an IT perspective, in terms of taking those proactive steps, we'll take a look exactly some of the things that you can literally just take it out from here, or at least assign some of those things to your business and say that you're responsible for it, in terms of whether it's policies or whether it's a particular security that feature that needs to be implemented, whatever it is. The first thing you can do is to try and understand some of that. So we'll look at security and compliance centers very briefly, some specifics that I wanted to look at that. But one of the first things that you want to probably consider looking is basically where do you stand in terms of the current scores of it. So and that's not just for your particular Microsoft 365 environment, but also it's more from a from compared to other organizations as well. Just while I'm at it, what I'm going to try and do is I'm just going to go back to my other environments. If I go back to demo admin, see if that works. go back. I'm going to just sign out. Right, I'm going to try one more time. My SharePoint admin. Let's go through proper way. Admin.microsoft.com. That's better. Right, good, excellent. Okay, so it was probably a glitch from my point of view, so apologies for that earlier on. Okay, so if I now head over to my security center, or in fact, first I'll go to the compliance center. That's the one that really closely aligns with the business side of things. So when I go through here now, so some organizations probably still use the old security compliance admin center that's got all the features, everything together. But obviously over the period of last 12 to 18 months, we obviously have two centers here. So compliance core is one of those areas in that compliance admin center that you can take a look. Now, there's a lot going on here. You got your compliance core, you got your data classification. We'll look at that in a minute. But also you got all the policies and again, e-discovery and all those things. So again, we're not the experts as a Microsoft 365 admin, but certainly we should know enough to be able to point to the compliance manager or somebody who might be looking after this. And this is not a technical tool by any stretch. It's designed for a business user. And one of the first things I look at here is compliance score. So whether I'm doing a health check or I just want to understand, where do you stand in terms of your information wise, then this kind of tells me not only that Microsoft have done their duty care, if you like, to look after the tenant, and they obviously will score the maximum points. Now, as an organization, and this is a demo tenant, nothing's been configured, your score will be different depending on what you've implemented and what you've kind of fed in to this information here in order to promote that score. And of course, the idea here is not to get 100%, but certainly high enough to make sure that you're protected and have the relevant procedures in place in order to protect yourself from this particular tenant for any other kind of misuse of the tenant itself. So if I go in here in the compliance score, and then typically I've got my four sections, four tabs here. So I've got my improvement actions, which is the one area for it. But I've also got solutions, which basically each of the controls that I have and the policies associated with that, I can have those grouped within the solutions. So first of all, if I go into improvement actions, again, there's a lot of information there. I can export all that if I don't want to use this web version. Have a look at that in my Excel spreadsheet. I can slice and dice that data, give it to relevant people in the organization to come up with the answers to be able to protect that. Or I can do other things like, for example, in this case, we're going to say, if I search DLP, so one of the things I get here is DLP, create DLP policies, create customized DLP policies. So if I go into this particular create DLP for personally identifiable information, then it'll give me a good information around, at least at a glance, now this for my tenant, or at least this particular action, it says it's not part of following any particular standards or regulatory. If I'm based in another country, and if I've kind of configured my environment to be able to respect the local regulatory standards, then those relevant actions will light up according to that. But at least while I'm here, it tells me that at least if I do want to implement it, these are the kind of steps to go through and what types of things I should be looking out for. And then I've got the actual specifics of this particular action that I want to manage. So in this case, I know somebody in the organization who's going to do this. So in this case, I get a few options. First of all, I can assign this particular task to somebody. So it uses my Office, the users directory here. So I can type in here that this particular action should be looked after by Megan in compliance team. I can, as you know, as the administrator or compliance manager, whoever's going to use this tool, I can say part of the plan is that it's not implemented yet. It's a bit like not started, and if it was implemented, then obviously the relevant fields will open up. So if I go into not implemented, excuse me, then obviously that's going to assign that particular task to Megan so that she can go and do something about it. So that's kind of a very quick way to just look at that in terms of how you can quickly assign some of the actions for your compliance amongst many actions you have within that. So here in the summary, you got 27 points available. Excuse me. So you got 27 points available. So, and you got the task assigned to Megan on that. So if I go into Megan's email, then what she'll get, hopefully she'll have got an email. So there's Megan on the top right here. And if I go into our email, Outlook. So I had email earlier on as well, and obviously this is my US tenant here, so that's why it's got American time. But here's the email that just came a few minutes ago, 10:43, and so it just tells me simple stuff, you know, control action, create DLP policies for personally identifiable information, and it was assigned to me. Now, as a compliance administrator, I didn't have to fire up an email. I didn't have to really type out the email or send anything else. Then, you know, in this case, I can just literally click on that action item, and it will take me to that compliance center, to that particular action within that, and being able to then look at that action in more detail. So same as where I was before, and it's taken me all the way in there. And okay. I think it just loaded up and then it's kind of just offloaded, but it takes me to straight same screen as I was there as an administrator. There you go. So that's what it is. But the good thing about here is that I don't really have to use SharePoint or OneDrive or my file shares or whatever. If I'm assigned this task and I'm responsible for it, then I can actually manage documents. So if I've got any relevant protocols or procedures or even somebody's email confirmation, whatever it is, I can put all my documents tied up to this particular task inside within this screen here. And that way I can manage my compliance for all those actions as one of the team members inside the compliance efficiently. And then I can make other notes within here. So if I'm testing this particular policy, then you know all those notes and everything else goes in there. So it's a nice way to manage all your information about your policies. So it's not really complicated. Obviously, when you scale it up, it does look a mammoth of a task, but at least you have a system to work with. The other part I wanted to look at was, so that was specifically I wanted to cover off in terms of the compliance area. So if I just switch back to my admin. So if I go back to my admin center, so I'm going to close the compliance and head back over to security. Security has got similarly a secure score. Again, we will not go in a greater detail for it. In this case, it's taken me to the old admin center, but here within that, I can click on the Microsoft 365 Security Center, or simply just go to security.microsoft.com. Now, again, similar layout as compliance risks. In this case, I got 22% of the score, which is most probably why my tenant was playing up. I don't know, but it's probably beside the point. But again, a few things you got here is within this area, yeah, you got all the classifications around your sensitivity labels, retention labels, targeting to various areas for your OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, and so forth. Again, it's not the area that personally I specialize in a great insight, but if I was to come here, then the first thing I would look at is a secure score. The only difference here is that you've got improvement actions here. So excuse excuse me, again for require MFA, and there's too many global admins as well in this particular environment. So it tells me exactly who these users are, who they're affected as well. So you can see 4 + 2, 6 people with global admin. So it gives me that live info inside this particular improvement area to make. But unlike Compliance Center, this doesn't give me an option to share, to assign this particular task to anybody who's going to enforce this particular area of the action that might be related to the policy. But what I can do though is share either through email or post a message somewhere in some channel inside Microsoft Teams or Microsoft Planner. That's probably as far as it goes within that. But again, it gives me all the information at a glance, what it is about, and the implementation path, what it looks like, as well as and with some specific instructions of how to go about switching it on. So that was kind of the security center from a security scores. Again, there's lots in within this here. But if I go back to very quickly on the compliance side of things, and again, when the question always gets asked if you've done a migration, for example, or whether you've put a lot of data, you've switched on the tenant, you've rolled out Teams and SharePoint, but security was not configured or compliance was not configured, because as part of the project, that might be a separate phase of the program. So you may come back later and then try and put all these things, and that's fine, it's doable. But then for X amount of time or days or weeks, you will have built up enough profile to be able to go into this depth to understand what exactly is inside my Microsoft 365 environment. So if I go into data classification, again, at a glance, it gives me information about the sensitive info that's been used. So if I go over here, then I've got 45 records to do with credit cards. And then I've got all the other EU and US bank account numbers and so forth. And that's fine. It gives me a good info to begin with. But if I wanted to go into further detail of that, then I can go into something that's called Content Explorer. So this is inside compliance and go into the Content Explorer within the data classification area. So once I go in there, now as a global administrator, you will not be able to get into this, at least to the depths of if the information is inside SharePoint or OneDrive, even though you might be a SharePoint administrator as well. So you have to have a specific roles. Just while that's loading up, is that there are a couple of roles you have to go inside the Office 365 Security and Compliance Admin Center and have two checkboxes checked: Content Explorer List and Content Explorer View. So you will get as far as here. It'll give you all the numbers. So in this case, I've got 45 credit cards and 44 EU debit card. It then refreshes where that information resides. But if I go into my credit card number here, if I double click on SharePoint, when you do that as a global admin, and if you don't have access to it, you will just not go beyond that. So as a compliance manager, and with those two roles that I mentioned, you can then go further in here. So in that particular SharePoint side, it said there's 4 records, and specifically within Mark 8 project team, which is a Microsoft Teams as well as with its dependent SharePoint site, there are 2 files within that. So if I double click on that, and you can see the location path is building up, taking me all the way down to a file. In this case, it's a manufacturing and delivery plan with no real kind of notifications on it. And obviously, it's Jack, in this case, Jack Elmore, who's working with that file. So at least I can go to that level of detail. And this doesn't require any third-party tools or anything like that. I can go straight in there and obviously look at the information that's classified with that. Now, I was having issues with this earlier on. In this case, doesn't have a preview. Okay, that's fine. So I can go to the actual file itself within that, and then being able to then download that file and just inspect it to see what's in it. Now, obviously, if I do go in there, then obviously, depending on how big the document is, in this case, let me bring that across. So that's the file that opened up, and yeah, clearly all the credit card numbers are in there. So, it's kind of, if you like, a very slightly detailed, but very quick way to go into it and have a look the state of your data around that. So that way you can at least enforce more protocols around that. So that was kind of, if you like, very quickly around the security compliance centers. And I'm just going to have a quick look at the chat window to see if there are any questions before covering off other areas. I don't think there is, so that's okay. Hopefully you're taking it in, but feel free to ask any question. No matter how daft the question is, please do. But yeah, otherwise just post the question in the chat window. Okay, I'm looking at the clock and I've got about 7 minutes, so I'm just going to go through my slides. So the other area of within the admin centers, and obviously Teams admin is the biggest area. Now, obviously, I don't intend to go into the Teams admin center to show each and every parts of it, but there are general things here to consider. And policies are the biggest part of it, whether that's the meeting policies or live events. And even with live events, for example, do you just want that to happen only inside your organization, or do you want the public members to be able to come to your tenant and have the live events viewed to that as well? Now, for my user group that I run for Microsoft 365 UK, I use Microsoft 365 tenant for that. It's a dedicated tenant, Microsoft Teams, and there I've got my everyone set up, so anybody on the planet can come to that link that get posted and come to that. So I can disable all those things as part of the policies and settings, whether to allow or not allow. So these are some of the screenshots I've put together, and including on your Microsoft Teams. For example, if you got your on the navigation bar, if you like, on the left hand side, you can switch on or off some of the apps that you may want to release on that. So I've kind of put this as for a reference there. And again, there are tons of, adoption guides, the admin packs for that, in order to kind of go through this step by step for each of these configurations. But for somebody new to the tenant, then that's a very quick way to kind of get to it. The other part that kind of catches most people out, and for those who are in SharePoint for a long time, will be okay with this, because they predominantly know that SharePoint external sharing was there right from the start. Microsoft Teams came afterwards. Microsoft 365 groups, or formerly Office 365 groups, came about 5 years ago or something. And then obviously you have this guest access versus external sharing. They're definitely two different settings. At the tenant level, on the left-hand side, you've got that main switch, whether to allow the users to add the guest to the organization, but also whether to allow, in this case, the outside members to those groups. So in this case, the Microsoft Teams, which is obviously dependent upon Microsoft 365 groups. But also you got those specific settings in there, whether only to have just the group owners or the team owners to add people from outside. Otherwise, anybody in your team in Microsoft Teams will be able to invite the guest users, if only the guest access is switched on, because by default it's off. So don't worry, if you got Teams, by default is off, but obviously when we went through our setup a few moments ago, we switched it on. So when that was switched on, and if these are left on as well, then potentially from day one, anybody in your Microsoft Teams will be able to come inside your Teams if you invite them. On the right-hand side is the SharePoint specific settings for external sharing, and OneDrive is part of SharePoint. So there you have options to further enhance the external sharing experience, whether you want to invite anyone on the planet to access a particular document or even a SharePoint site, or you want to limit that to just your organization itself. So you have those controls, but whichever the option you choose for SharePoint, OneDrive can't overtake that. So just bear that in mind. And then you got further settings within that. So if you want to limit the external sharing, sorry, I do apologize. I've got a dog next door in my next to our house, so that's the noise coming from that. But yeah, you can limit that external sharing to a specific domain, whether that's for your partners or customers. And also you can have a Office 365 group or even Microsoft Teams group, whichever it is, or even Active Directory group, and limit only certain people who can share externally those files. So you have that granular level of controls inside SharePoint to control that external sharing. The link is there, and it kind of details very well there within the whole experience, as well as the for end user in terms of what they will see and what kind of options they get as well. Now, that's kind of, if you like, if from a world of working with the GUI and all the admin centers. For some of us IT pros, we work with PowerShell. It's good, it's great, it's constantly being updated with all the commandlets, and these are the latest versions you have here. But something that's been kind of enabled for, I think it's been almost a year now, is the Cloud Shell. So you can access that from your Microsoft 365 admin and being able to kind of work with that seamlessly. So if I quickly just show you that, if I go into Microsoft 365 admin here, then on the suite bar, I've got my PowerShell icon there, and I get a nice little window opening up there. This is the same as Azure Cloud Shell as well. So I can choose my Cloud Shell here, and then being able to, okay, I did have a subscription. Sorry, my mistake. That's probably because it's in my other tenant. So if I go into my Microsoft 365 admin, just very quickly, kind of just show you that once you've got that, so if I click on my PowerShell icon there, then straight away on my browser or even on my iPhone, doesn't matter, as long as I can get to this URL, then I can just fire up my Cloud Shell. And this is very powerful now because I have a lot of PowerShell scripts and everything else, and that's okay. They still work, but I don't really have to rely on my PowerShell program or module on my machine, on my device. I like to keep that very clean. So here I can just go and install my relevant modules for SharePoint Online or Microsoft Teams or Exchange, and then being able to sort of work with those commandlets to create sites or teams or any other features or configurations. So again, very handy little PowerShell window, the Cloud Shell technology that we use within the Microsoft 365. And then you've got obviously the various links in there as well. So do take a look at some of the common tasks that you tend to achieve. I typically tend to use Microsoft Teams PowerShell quite a lot. Obviously, that's pretty much what's happening these days. But things like creating team templates and with the channels and all those things. But obviously, team templates, we've been hearing about it from the roadmap. It's on the cards. So hopefully, who knows when that's going to come in the near future and so forth. But yeah, certainly, if you're going to Microsoft, online Microsoft Ignite, then look out for some announcements and updates. There's tons to be announced there as well. Okay, so from an end user perspective, they get bombarded with a lot of tech and everything else. Even for the administrators here, then one of the things you can do is control those cards that you get, whether you're in Word or Excel or PowerPoint. And so what I mean by that is that if you go into settings, close, go back to my settings. Yeah, if I go back to my settings and org settings, so within my org settings, inside my Microsoft Admin Center, if I scroll right to the bottom, I've got something here called What's New in Office, and this is a very good way to actually kind of promote any particular features or functionality within your Office program. So in this case, this is like ordered by the feature updates you get. So this is the September 20 release version, and specifically within that area, or in August rather, there was a particular feature here called link to a slide. That's something that's been kind of rolled out in preview at the moment. But again, it says here that it's hidden, so it just means I don't want to showcase that to the users when it lights up on their PowerPoint, for example. But if I want to change that, and if I want to promote that, then I can just click on that little icon there, and then I can just say show there. So there's a button there. So it says a feature will be shown to the users, and that's all the users in the organizations. There's no real permissions around that. And that's not to say that you're enabling or disabling the feature. You're only controlling the show and the hide of that the help topic to the users that they get. Okay, so so that was kind of the very quick what's new how you control. The other area is not specifically for SharePoint as for Microsoft 365 admin, but from your user's perspective to have take a look at something that's available open source, which is the Microsoft 365 Learning Pathway, which is basically a SharePoint site you get, which is all packaged up with help topics pointing to Microsoft docs.microsoft.com site with the relevant teams, Office programs, SharePoint. So you have all your help manuals and the videos and step-by-step instructions all within that particular SharePoint site, which you can then customize it, brand it to your requirements for your org. As an administrator for Microsoft 365, because it changes all the time, certification is very key. I got certified a few months ago, and it's definitely worthwhile to understand that you may just do Teams or Exchange, but that's the path it looks like, and definitely kind of take a look at the exam at least to understand what sort of things are expected, and there are some good online courses available on that as well. Personally, I use a lot of these test lab guides. So if you don't have a tenant to practice on, or if your organization has only got one tenant, you surely don't want to try things out on that environment, then do take a look at the lab guides. They're very interactive, and being able to try it out each bite-size piece of functionality. So for example, like the password write back or automating licenses and group membership and so forth. And you got also data classification aspect of it as well. So that's quite useful, and that gets updated once or twice a year. And then obviously Message Center gets flooded, like for all of us, our inboxes and everything else. So that's a very quick way to synchronize with your planner, being able to set up that plan, being able to control what sort of messages you want to have in your planner, whether that's SharePoint, Exchange. You got about 30 odd different options there to pick as to which messages you want from which products. And then being able to control, in terms of how often do you want to import that, whether it's from one every day or once a week, or maybe just every for the past 28 days. So you got different frequencies there, like so there, and then be able to then have an automatic sync set up, and then just creates a straightforward planner plan, which is something new that came a few weeks ago as well. So that's quite useful, because up until now it was a manual way to kind of manage your message center. So hopefully that's kind of given you a flavor of all the various facets of different admin centers, some of the specifics that I covered in terms of compliance, security, and some of the areas of kind of just managing generally the whole landscape of Microsoft 365. Then hopefully this session has kind of proven that some of the things you can do is very quick and very fast way of doing it, and certainly being able to pass the information to somebody else in the team who might be responsible for policies and all those things. And all this was done inside on the simple browser for admin.microsoft.com. And I do apologize for earlier hiccups on the login and unable to access the browser. That was probably my setup. So, but yeah, I'll take the questions, and I just want to say a big thanks to each and every one of you and the organizers, Vignesh, Lalit, and the rest of the crew. You've done a great job to bring this event online, and I'll be happy to be back again next year. But yeah, I'll take the questions, and yeah, and I'll just say enjoy the evening.
Already started. So if at all you have any specific questions which you want to stay back and ask, you can stay back, else the next session has already started. Thank you.
Okay, any questions, anybody?
I see something in the chat.
Okay, can you yes, can you explain about power.office.com? Oh, That's Ravikant. Can you tell me exactly what that is in terms of which bits do you want me to go through? So if I go in here, nope, it's not the one I recognize. Is that Power Platform by any chance? It's not liking it. I really don't know. The only thing I can probably think about is if you're talking about Power Platform or experiences or Power BI perhaps, then yeah, not sure how to answer that question. Sorry. Oh, you've got dashboard written down. Power BI dashboard. That's all I can think of. Maybe that's relating to the adoption pack that you get to see your matrix around your services. Maybe that's probably what you're referring. Then that's something that you can actually enable through your Power BI by having that content pack available to your tenant, if that's what you're referring to. Any other questions? Okay, no worries. I think we'll call it an end, Vignesh. I think, but techchirag.com. If you do have any thoughts afterwards or any questions, then feel free to ping me there. But other than that, once again, big thanks and thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for the wonderful session, Chirag, and looking forward to see you in an in-person session at India very soon.
Yeah, me too. I look forward to seeing you as well. Thanks, Vignesh, and all the best for the rest of the event. So yeah, great job.
All right.
Thanks, Lalit.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, folks. Let's move on to the next session. It's already started. Take care, Chirag. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks everyone. Bye.